So the relationship between politics and economics can go both ways. And the political organization, in turn, can promote economic development. Now, Mencius illustrated this point as follows. He said, without the great principles of government and its various activities, wealth will not be sufficient. So we'll talk more about the principle of government in part 3 of this lecture. But first of all, let's have a look at the rationale behind this causal relation, between politics and economics. In the Book of Rights, the chapter of the Great Treatise, it says, when a ruler attaches importance to the state, he loves the people. When he loves the people, punishments and penalties are just. When punishments and penalties are just, the people are peaceful. When people are peaceful, wealth is sufficiently realized. When wealth is sufficient, all purposes can be realized. Okay, now let's make this causal inference more explicit. And we're going to do this by looking at a flow chart. Ancient sages rulers may have their differences in methodology, which is dependent upon the social structure of the time. But there is one thing in common, and it is that they treated the people as their own children. And we call them the benevolent kings. That's one of the cores of traditional Chinese governance. Now, in modern days, one of the examples of benevolent rulers is His Majesty King Bhumibol Adulyadej of Thailand. Now, in remembrance of the past king, the Venerable Master Chin Kung mentioned in the ceremony that from what he did during his 70-year reign, we can see that His Majesty King Bhumibol Adulyadej really loved his people as if they were his own children. Why? The Thai people often said, if you ask any Thai people, they said, we may not be the best country in the world, but we have the best king. And, King Bhumibol's portrait can be seen at the airport, in the street, in shops, and cinemas in Bangkok. At the sight of that portrait, Thai people would join their palms and kneel down and bow as a sign of respect for His Majesty. Now also, to express their love for His Majesty, the Thai people celebrate Father's Day on the 5th of December every year, which is also His Majesty's birthday. Now on that day, the Thai people will stand quite solemnly and sing the royal anthem. So this was a sagely king that had been portrayed by the ancient Chinese. People served and loved the king as their own parents. People looked up to the king as the sun and moon that nurtured all. People respected the king as they would towards divinity, and people are in awe of the king as they would towards thunder. Now, among the many things that His Majesty had done for the Thai people, King Bhumibol initiated what is called the Royal Development Projects. And what is that? Well, sandy loam soils, hard soils, and laterite soils are found extensively throughout Thailand. But they're not suitable for farming. And much farming land in Thailand also had a high salt content. So to solve this problem, His Majesty initiated research projects and devised a series of effective approaches of improving the quality of the soil to ensure the healthy growth of crops. As for the poor mountainous region in northern Thailand, which had been used for growing opium poppies, His Majesty encouraged local people to plant over 300 types of cash crops. Now, this approach has not only reduced the supply of narcotics in the world, but also promoted the stability and prosperity of the mountainous regions in northern Thailand. But in order to achieve all this, an effective legal system is absolute key. Both reward and punishment should be justified. I mean, you can imagine the importance of legal system when it comes to fighting narcotics and converting opium field into farmland. So with justice in place, people can be in peace. What's the result? Well, in the year 2017, Bloomberg News released its misery index, which comprised 65 countries. And guess what? Thailand's unemployment rate is only 1%. 1%. And is therefore once again ranked the world's happiest nation. But this is also the third time in a row that Thailand has won that title. So this happy outcome, I would say, is the result of His Majesty King Bhumibol's loving his people as his own children. This is a living proof of the sage's teaching. Now, we must examine, the case study of King Bhumibol more closely. An important question is, from the government's perspective, which is more important, or which is more effective in bringing peace to the people? Is it lifeless law provision or promotion of virtue? Which one is it? Well, the law is definitely needed, no doubt, because it forms the basis of reward and punishment. However, virtue is a higher level of governance. Confucius made this crystal clear. He said, if the people be led by laws and uniformity be sought to be given to be given to them by punishment, they will try to avoid the punishment and have no sense of shame. In contrast, if they be led by virtue and uniformity be sought to be given to them by rules of propriety, they will have the sense of shame and moreover will become good. Confucius also said, in hearing litigations I am like anybody. What is necessary, however, is to cause the people to have no litigations. So this means that when governing the state, Confucius prefers moral law to legal codes. Now, let me explain this principle in a bit more details, if I may. Although this is, slightly outside the scope of our course, we need to mention that the foundation of this virtue-based governance is education. And more specifically, it is moral education from a very early age. People do not feel happy because they have the money. People feel truly happy when their lives are guided by morality and faith. Sometimes I look back and I think about my entire life of formal education received in schools and university. I don't recall anybody ever talked about morality with any degree of great seriousness, especially in university education. I mean, look, teachers and instructors, they must have mentioned it at some point. And perhaps my mind must have, wandered off during these important moments. But what I do recall very vividly is that money and fame are an important purpose of my life. It has been. But of course, if people say it like that, it would have sounded very uncomfortable, and most people would have rejected that idea. But if you replace those terms by more scientific terminologies, such as personal net worth, annual income, liquid assets, annualized rate of return, financial return on educational investment, personal impact factor, or things like that, or professional network size, then they sound quite all right. Well, it is true, okay, that our education system is shifting towards technology and scholarly activities, and gradually drifting away from moral education. The truth is, morality is not assessed in the college or university selection process at all. Now, also because academic performance is the only criteria that is used in the entrance exam of higher education institutions, which, in turn affect the first job of graduates, morality becomes less and less relevant during these crucial stages of human development. These days, the competition is taking place during much earlier stage of life, even primary school and secondary school. So the lacking of attention to moral education in early stage or early age is the cause of many social problems that only seem relevant to adults. So, to combat these social problems, the government improve the legal system, okay, making law more stringent and punishment more justified. And there has been many great achievements in this area. For example, government around the world have launched numerous programs to make the criminal justice system more effective, such as shortening the time that defendants have to wait for trial, and a more transparent prosecution decision-making, etc. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, people always find a way to explore the loopholes in the legal system and take advantage of it with pride. In my research of corporate governance, we often find that some corporate executives are not only experts in business and marketing, but also extremely creative in appropriating shareholders' wealth by exploiting governance loopholes. Things like stock option backdating, pet projects, golden parachute, insider trading, tax avoidance, empire building, earning management, also CEOs increasing the difficulty in fraud detection by appointing connected directors, etc. The list is absolutely endless. The evidence is mounting. But it's unlikely that the Confucius had ever worked in a public company. I doubt, but he understood the problem of law-based governance. The only way to reduce criminal activity with any degree of consistency is morality, and it comes from moral education. It's equally important for the governor of the state to set a personal example himself. In the previous lecture, we mentioned Yan Zi, who was the prime minister during the spring and autumn period. Also, in this lecture, we just mentioned the past king of Thailand, His Majesty King Bhumibol Adulyadej. Now, both of these rulers governed with law, but more importantly, with their personal virtue. This is the role a good government plays in promoting people's economic life. So, if you read through the traditional Chinese classics, the relationship between politics and economics takes considerable weight in the governance principle of ancient China. And you can see that it is always about the development of human nature. Now, in order to have a deeper understanding of this relation, let's have a closer look at the principles of government of traditional Chinese culture. Now, it's a very broad area, but we will just focus on two major areas. The first area is related to democracy, or more specifically, imperial democracy. The second area is related to the system of instruction.